Alrighty. And there are stamps. By now, I hope that you've all prepped your stamps if you want to work along with us. I like to trim my stamps very, very, very close. You want to use a scissor that looks something like this. We sell these. These are the Kai brand. Stampin' Up! Has an excellent variety of the same thing. There's even a Tim Holtz scissors that, pretty much does the same thing. But these are great for cutting rubber. You want to trim your rubber very, very, very close. And then, of course, you have to have a way of hooking your rubber to the acrylic block. And we're going to look at that here in a moment. In your kit, you have a variety of papers. Today, since we're working in color pencil, your paper is a 100-pound uncoated or matte finish paper. You should have 8 pieces in your kit. That gives you 1 to stamp on and 1 to put on the inside of each of your cards. Or if you'd prefer, you can stamp 8 times. Now, also in your kit, because I know a lot of people getting these kits wouldn't have it otherwise, is a piece of Eclipse tape. When we put Eclipse tape in the kits, we do a split so that it's easy for you to peel this off. You're going to have an easier time if you stamp your image and then peel off the backing before you trim your image. If you cut it out with the backing on it, you may end up having trouble, and you may need really sharp fingertips or a knife to separate the backing sheet from the Eclipse. And then, like I said, there are instructions. Now, for those of you that have joined me for some of the online classes through some of the other groups, I am always given a specific time slot. With the OOAK group, which, by the way, has just been a godsend, with that group, I get 25 minutes, and I have to get in and get out in 25 minutes. Because we are a more informal group here in the Making a Scene Facebook group, I'm not in any rush, so we're gonna look at a few things that I don't normally have time to look at. As I said, you have to have a way of hooking your rubber to your block. Now, a lot of you that have worked with me over the years know that I really like tack and peel, and I have got, I don't know, probably close to maybe 150 blocks that already have tack and peel on them. The tack and peel is a powerful adhesive. You put your stamps on and it holds them. It will not drop them. You can clean it with the Ultra Clean Stamp Cleaner. I usually spray it on and massage it in and rinse it off with water. Because mine get used and abused, sometimes I have to do that a couple of times to get as much of the ink and the paper dust out of it as possible. At the end of the day, if you use them heavy enough, you'll end up getting some stain. And I don't know if you can, I don't know how much of this you can see. There is stain here, but it's transparent. I can see through it. So even though it's discolored, it's a transparent discoloration. If you have tack and peel on your blocks, you can cover them with the cover sheet that comes with it. Now, you'll see that mine are marked up. When you put this on the right way, this peels off so easy. When you put it on the wrong way, you fight with it. So I take a Sharpie marker and I mark my protective coverings so that when I store them, they don't grab things. And if I wanted to, I could use the opposite side for like clear stamps and cling foam and what have you. One of the downsides to tack and peel, and one of the things that a lot of people don't like about it, is you need to have a block that is close in size to the actual stamp. Because if you don't, For instance, if we take the bigger block and we put the little stamp on it, and we go to stamp, if we rock it all, the tack and peel is likely to grab the paper. I don't know if you saw that or not, but it'll grab the paper. That is a problem. So you have to be careful unless you use a block that is about the same size as the stamp. I do that, and I really like tack and peel. Just this year, we have developed a product called Grip It. Now, Grip It also holds your stamps really, really well. It's also transparent. Grip It has thickness. You can see as I peel it off that this is pretty thick. So the Grip It gives you some additional cushion, and many people really like that. You can see that it's removable, so you can put it on your block, you can take it off your block, and it comes in 2 sizes. If you need it for other size blocks, you can cut it with the same kind of scissors that you use to cut your rubber. So you can actually cut it up, and you can have different sizes for other size blocks if you want. Now we have something new that I also want to show you. Many of you have the Keller Box styluses, and we use these a lot. We now have an acrylic block snap-on attachment. So you can actually snap this onto your styluses, and for images that are smaller than 1 1/4 by 1 1/4, now you have a stamp pad. You've just made your stylus into a stamp pad. This is brand new. I've had them like 2 days, so I'm still getting used to them myself. They are just acrylic, so you do need to put something on them to hold your stamp onto them. They're so small, you might be able to use a piece of double stick tape, or you could cover them with tack and peel, or you can use A-leans on the back of your rubber, anything. But we're going to be using all 3 of these today. Now the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to stamp and we're going to cut our mask. To do that, we're going to be using the Eclipse tape. If you purchase a big thing of Eclipse tape, this is what it looks like. If you've purchased the kit, you already have a small piece in it. I usually just kind of roll it out on my desktop or table or whatever I'm using, and stamp it and cut it. I'm almost at the end of this roll, so give me a second. I've got to Alrighty. See, I'm at the end of this roll. So we're going to need a mask of our barn. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ink the barn. Now, I just glanced at my computer and I see that there are comments. If you joined us a little bit late, I want you to know that I'm here in the building by myself. And so it's really difficult for me to actually do the demonstration and also watch the computer. But I want you to understand that when we are finished here, I will go back through all the comments and I will answer any questions. So hang with me. This is something new for all of us. So I inked my stamp and I'm stamping it on my Eclipse tape. Now, your stamp on your Eclipse tape does not have to be a perfect image, but I want you to notice how I usually do my stamping. I usually have one hand holding the block so it doesn't walk around, and I'll take my thumb and I'll put extra pressure around it. Now, I'm going to now switch to holding with the other hand so that I can take the other thumb and I can press around. This is my common, and then right in the middle, you always want to press firmly in the middle. This is how I do most of my stamping, because you want to get a firm press, but you don't want to rock. So that is my usual technique. Now, this is, let's see, this is the card that we're making. And in your instructions, it gives you a really good illustration as to how to cut your mask. If masking is new to you, I want you to understand that this, even though it's thin paper, it has height. So when you cut your mask and you position it on your artwork and you stamp across it, like we're going to do right here, we're going to stamp this tree right across the mask. When we do that, it's like throwing a plank on a stairway. You've got a little void underneath that plank, and in this case, your rubber stamp is the plank. So we've got to cut away enough of the image to allow that plank, or that stamp in this case, to actually recess down and not leave a void, which we call a halo. If you're having trouble getting halos, then you need to either cut more image off of your mask, or you need to position the mask lower, which sometimes you can do and other times you can't. So I'm going to cut my mask right now. I know some of you have probably already done this prep work, but for those of you who haven't, you can work along with me. And I know that when I pick this up so I can hold it close enough to see, it's probably going in and out of focus. I apologize for that. Okay, I have a mask. Now we need to take a piece of our stamping paper. And this card is formatted to be a horizontal card. And the first image we're going to put down is the barn. The reason for this is your mask allows you to tuck things behind one another. So normally you work from the front to the back. So you put the barn down so that when you mask it, you can tuck the trees behind it. Now I know there's some of you saying, well, what about the grass? Well, the grass is going to come up to and maybe even overlap slightly the barn, but we don't have to mask. We've already got the barn masked. So we can go ahead and we can put the foreground in like that. Things that don't overlap don't matter. You can put them in whatever order you want. Getting back to the grass though, basically we are tucking that grass underneath of the barn. So the barn still goes down first, and even though the grass will come up to meet it, we're actually tucking the grass underneath of it, and that is part of the reason that I cut this part out on my mask, and it looks like this, so that if we have some grass here, it works. So the first thing I'm going to do here, getting ready to stamp the card, is I'm going to ink. And I really encourage people with anything that's large to ink like this. If you try to press like this, you are far more likely to get ink on the edges or even on your pad that you don't want. When you tap, 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 you are far more likely to avoid that, and you're far more likely to get a even inking. Now, I always examine my stamp, and if I'm not certain, I'll actually practice it on my practice paper here. But I examine it to make sure that the ink is uniformly covered. Now, I like the back end of the barn to hang off of the card a little bit. So I'm going to put it right about like this. And we're going to press. And again, you see me holding the block while I use my thumb. And then we're going to come over and we're going to hold it while I use this thumb. And then before we lift it up, we're going to press it really firmly in the middle. And then we're going to lift straight up. Now, when you position the mask, if we were only going to tuck trees in, we really wouldn't have to cut too much away because we'd be able to move it down. But in this case, we're putting trees behind it, we're putting grass in front of it, so we really need to have space all the way around it. You should be able to line up the image and I know it's a little bit difficult sometimes to see, but you should be able to line it up. And I know you can't see this, but the image that I stamped on the card is peeking out from underneath of the mask. The mask is about here. So I've got about this much image peeking out. Now we're going to move to the tree. Now the tree is tall. Good thing that wasn't inked. The tree is tall, so if I put the tree here, look what's going to happen. We're going to have trunks sticking out down here. Well, we don't want that. So you can take a scrap of Eclipse tape and put across it, or you can use the stamper's favorite tool, which is a paper towel, and take a piece of paper towel and lay across here to make sure that you don't get trunk down underneath of the barn. Again, get some dirt off of that. Again, you're going to see me inking like this. And since we aren't going to be stamping this right now, you really don't have to ink the entire trunk, but we want to make sure that the foliage is uniformly inked. And then I'm going to start right here. And I'm going to put this down. Again, I'm walking around with my thumb, making sure that everything is stamped straight up. Now, I want you to notice, I hope you can see this, there is a pile of ink right here. I'm going to tip this, hopefully you can see it. If you're working along with me, take a moment to examine what is left on your card. There's a pile of ink here where I went off the top, and there's a pile of ink right here where we crossed over the mask. If you were to stamp this right now without re-inking, you would get something like that, which is unsightly. So a lot of times people want to stamp multiple times without re-inking. Well, there are times when that's appropriate, but there are many times when that's not appropriate. So we're going to go back and we're going to completely re-ink, and again make sure that it's, uniformly covered. And now I'm going to come over, and I want my trees to be a slightly different height. So I'm going to move this one down just a little bit. And again, we're going to hold, and we're going to press with our thumb. And we're going to make sure that we especially press firmly where it crosses the mask. And there we are. Now on our card, I wanted another tree over here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put that tree in now. Okay. Alrighty, now I'm going to wait to put this tree in until we have the grass down, because we want to make sure that the tree is not floating in midair. I'm also going to wait to put the deer on because we want to make sure that they're high enough that you can actually see the form of the body, but low enough that their feet are in the grass. So at this point, the next thing we're going to do is the grass. Now, if you notice, the tree trunks are an open image and there's actually a void in between them. Excuse me. This is what happens when my vocal cords act up. If I start coughing and clearing my throat, it's because the vocal cords are angry at me. If you're a purist, you would want to mask these trunks. But I'll be honest with you. The only way you can do that and have it be effective is by using a liquid mask. In my opinion, it's not necessary because the areas involved are so tiny. What I've done on this card every single time I've made it is I've just stamped the grass. There's really no grass pattern in here. That is just color pencil that makes you believe there is. And the open area on the trunks are so small that by the time you add the brown coloring, you just don't notice that you didn't mask them. So there's a lot of times when you can cheat when it comes to masking or not masking. And I do it a lot. Now, your grass stamp has a right side and a wrong side, and you want to make sure that the grass is pointing up. You may want to stamp it off on your practice paper first to make sure that it's going the right direction. So I'm going to come and I'm going to ink my grass. And where I start or where I don't start isn't real critical here. Remember, we still have a mask on our barn, okay? So I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to overlap that mask. And if you can see, the stamp is actually going off the edge here. So I'm going to press firmly without rocking, and you can see I have grass. Now, this is a form of step and repeat. If you put your next grass right here, and then you line up two more, and if you had a seam going right across the card right here, and another one right here, your eye would probably discern those. So when you're step and repeat stamping, whether it's with my grasses or whether it's with the Milky Way Stampscape stamp that we use a lot. You really want to alternate and offset those seams. So I'm going to come back now, and you have to slightly overlap. I'm going to slightly overlap here, and I'm going to stamp again. Now I can see I didn't position this fabulously because I have a gap down here that I wish I didn't have. But at the end of the day, it is not a deal breaker. It is not a big deal. So now you can see I'm going to slightly overlap right here. I'm going to overlap here and here, but my seams are offset. And I'm going to drop this down and give it some pressure. And we keep inking. And we just build our grassy area here. Now, I could either trim this off or I can ink it. I'm actually going to try to ink it. I'm going to make sure my grass is right side up. And there we have our grass. That was easy, right? Now on the original card here, sometimes I stamp this tree in gray, sometimes I don't. You can either stamp it in gray ink, or you can ink it thoroughly with black, stamp it off on your practice paper, and then go to your paper. But I'll be honest with you, the whole idea of doing it in gray was to make it look farther away. But it's a much smaller image, which gives it the illusion of being farther away anyway. And so I'm going to just ink it today in black. Now, when you get a stamp this size, it's a little bit of a toss-up whether you should tap the stamp on the pad or the pad on the stamp. When they're this small, I usually will do this. And because I'm doing this instead of the other way, I really take the time to make sure that I have it adequately inked. The reason I'm uncomfortable doing this is so much smaller than the pad that if I rock that pad, I can end up getting ink where I don't want it. So we're going to tap this again. I'm going to rotate my card so that I know what I'm doing. Well, now we still have a mask on here, remember. So if it overlaps a little bit, it is okay. Now we need our deer. And like I said, I've had these for like 2 days, so I'm still getting used to the feel. So I kind of like to stamp on practice paper before I actually move on to my card. And you want to make sure that the deer's feet are planted firmly in the grass, but that the deer bodies can be seen. And then, of course, we have our birds. And again, I kind of like to make sure that I've got them inked good. And let's put our birds about here. And our scene is built. And it's time to remove the mask for the great reveal. Now, the masks can be reused. We always store ours. For right now, I'm going to just put it on the back of my acrylic block. I usually have coated cardstock where I store them. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how I approach coloring with my color pencils. Pretty much any professional grade of color pencils will work. My favorite is Prismacolor. At some point in time, I've probably owned them all and sold them all. But at the end of the day, I always seem to migrate back to my Prismacolors. I like to have a pretty decent point on it, so I keep a sharpener here on my desk or stamping station. If you have worked with or taken classes with Copic markers, then you are already familiar with my approach to color pencils, because I like to use duos and trios of colors with my color pencils just like I would with my alcohol markers. So this is Prismacolor Lime Peel. It's one of my favorite greens. I'm going to kind of go in here and I am going to put down a base layer of lime peel on my tree foliage. You may have different colors, you may have different brands, and like I said, at the end of the day, as long as it's a good quality professional grade of pencil, it really shouldn't matter. Remember, if you want something to look dimensional, you have to have different values. So you have to have lights and darks, and it's usually your darks that really make things pop. Okay, so now we're going to go and we're going to use our dark green to add some of those darks I was just referencing. At the end of the day here, even though this is a beginner level scene and we are not getting into any kind of technique that is even intermediate, this is very beginner stuff. At the end of the day, we're going to have our lime peel, which is a light value. We're going to have our dark green, which is a medium to dark value, and we're going to have our black. Now I think I'm going to hit this with a sharpener to have just a little better point on this. Now I'm going to go in, I usually try to go in at kind of like the bases, because really if the sun was shining it would be lighter here and would get progressively darker. And I don't spend a lot of time here. I use a combination of dots and lines to drop in some of those dark values. And you can see I'm not I'm not even really aiming, but I want you to compare the two trees here and see how much additional dimension adding just a little bit of the darker green gives it. Look at the difference between this and this, or this and this. You know, just adding some of those darker green values, even without aiming, even without spending much time, really gives that some dimension. So we're going to go and we're going to do that on all of the tree foliage.